As war in the Middle East continues to escalate, Israel has just launched a targeted attack response on Iran.
Breaking news, I am told that Israel has started their attack against Iran.
In response to months of continuous attacks from the regime in Iran against the state of Israel, right now the Israel Defense Forces conducting precise strikes on military targets.
Multiple explosions have been reported around the Iranian capital of Tehran. This is meant to send a message of deterrence to the Iranian regime. The attack is ongoing at this moment, and we do understand, according to sources, that the focus are military targets in and around the Iranian capital of Tehran and also in the northern part of the country.
In response to months of continuous attacks from the regime in Iran against the state of Israel, right now, the Israel Defense Forces is conducting precise strikes on military targets in Iran. The regime in Iran and its proxies in the region have been relentlessly attacking Israel since October 7th on 7 fronts, including direct attacks from Iranian soil. Like every other sovereign country in the world, the state of Israel has the right and the duty to respond. Our defensive and offensive capabilities are fully mobilized. We will do whatever necessary to defend the state of Israel and the people of Israel.
The Israelis are only targeting military positions in Iran. This is not meant to be a widespread attack that drags the region into a broader war, I am told. I am told by a senior official here in Tel Aviv tonight that Israel is looking to send a message of deterrence to the Iranian regime to ensure that there are no further attacks against Israel.
This recent back and forth began when Hezbollah launched rockets into Israel on October 8, 2023, to show solidarity with Hamas. Then Israel targeted Hezbollah in southern Lebanon and killed about 7 Hezbollah leaders in late September. Obviously, Iran did not take this attack well, and on the 1st of October, it launched an airstrike into Israel as a retaliation. Now, soon after, Israel has responded with an attack of its own, fueling what might soon unravel into a whole war with Iran. Sensitive content about war is not the YouTube algorithm's favorite thing to boost, so these videos could be pushed back. Help us to continue to bring you informative content by liking this video and sharing it with your friends and family too. Right, let's get into today's video. Earlier, in its largest recorded attack, Iran launched about 200 ballistic missiles at military targets in Israel and sent the whole country into a state of panic. This is only the second direct attack that Iran has launched on Israel, first one being in April this year, and many people were not expecting it. In response to the attack, 10 million people were instructed to hide in bomb shelters at the end of Tuesday, in anticipation of more missile attacks from Tehran. Although the attack came as a shock, according to Israel military, they were able to intercept most of the missiles, and only a few managed to strike areas in central and southern Israel. IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari said, "There were a small number of hits in the center of Israel and other hits in southern Israel. The majority of the incoming missiles were intercepted by Israel and a defensive coalition led by the United States. So far, only 1 Palestinian has been reported dead after the attack." Social media were overrun with videos of the missiles, showing them flying over Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and exploding as soon as they were intercepted by Israel's defenses. Israel's air defense system, which is known as the Iron Dome, was designed to intercept short-range rockets that fly over Israel periodically from Iran or its allies like Hezbollah and Hamas. Israel also had the support of America, which intercepted some of the missiles with its air defense systems. US President Joe Biden commented on the attack, stating that it managed to take the drones down early before damage could be done. The US believes that the attack was the work of Iran and its proxies in Syria, Yemen, and Iraq.
Iran has just launched a retaliatory missile attack targeting Israel. A US senior administration official telling ABC News now that Iran is expected to fire 240 to 250 missiles at 4 targets in Israel. This includes the Mossad headquarters, Israel's spy agency, 3 Israeli air bases.
While some of the missiles were intercepted, Israel's Nevatim air base in the Negev desert took some hits. The Israeli military reported that the attacks on the airbase did not hit any weapons or critical infrastructure, which was a relief. Iran's attack has come as retaliation to Israel's actions against Hezbollah in the weeks of September. Recently, we crossed 1 million subscribers. Ever since then, we've been flooded with emails asking us questions and advice about growing a channel on YouTube. Even though we try our best to reply to every single email, sometimes these take up too much time, or they ask the same question we've answered before. That's why we've decided to put all of our YouTube advice into one email bootcamp completely free. So if you are someone interested in starting your own YouTube channel, you can get your email bootcamp by clicking the link below or scanning the QR code in the description. Now, back to the video. First, Israel eliminated Ibrahim Akil, senior operations commander in Hezbollah, considered to be the second in command of the organization. Then, in a follow-up attack on September 28th, Israel began to target specific leaders and killed Hezbollah leader Nasrallah in an airstrike at his underground headquarters in Beirut. On September 29th, Kaouk, the commander of Hezbollah's Preventive Security Unit and a member of Hezbollah's Central Council, was killed in an Israeli raid in outer Beirut, along with 5 other top leaders. The Israeli government's response to Iran's ballistic attack after its action against Hezbollah was very clear. It would be retaliating. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu put it plainly, stating that Iran has made a big mistake and that it would definitely be paying for it. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant also responded in a statement saying, "Iran has not learned a simple lesson. Those who attack the state of Israel pay a heavy price. Israel has kept its promise to Iran, and now we are watching a full-on war unfold in the Middle East." Some of you may be wondering how the tensions between the two countries escalated to this point, from silent assassinations to war-style airstrikes. Let us now take a look at Israel's past attacks on Iran. Tracing the war back a few years will help us understand why we have reached this point now with missiles flying between the two nations. We will begin in July 2024, when Ismail Haniyeh, the political leader of the exiled wing of Hamas, was assassinated during a visit to Tehran. Ismail Haniyeh had been the political leader of Hamas since 2017, and he was a key player in negotiations for a ceasefire during Israel's war in Gaza. He started out as the prime minister of the Palestinian National Authority before he became the leader of Hamas. As early as the 1990s, Haniyeh has been at the top of Israel's most wanted list and was even imprisoned in the country between 1988 and 1993. Before his assassination, he was an exile who maintained residence in Lebanon. Haniyeh had traveled to the region for the inauguration of President Masoud Pezeshkian when he was hit by a pre-drawn airstrike in the Iranian capital. At a press conference held after the attack, a Hamas spokesperson confirmed that he was hit directly by a rocket that was aimed at his residence in Tehran. Reports also showed that his bodyguard was killed in the strike. Iran immediately blamed Israel for the assassination, and the risk of war became imminent. Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's response was to declare that revenge was Iran's duty and that Israel would have to prepare for the harsh punishment that would come from attacking a dear guest at home. The loss was great for Iran and the international community because Haniyeh had been working hard to try and negotiate Israel's withdrawal from Gaza and potentially end the war in the region. The attack is being pinned on Israel because it had previously declared that it would kill Haniyeh and other Hamas leaders over the October 7th attack by Iran, which we will discuss later in the video. The chief of Israel's Mossad intelligence service pledged that he was going to hunt down every Hamas member involved in the attack on Israel and kill them, and it looks like he can now remove Haniyeh from that list. The effect of his death was that Hamas immediately pulled out of the ceasefire negotiations, putting to waste months of talks and the hope of peace. Frustrated by the actions of Israel, Qatar's Prime Minister Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani commented on the assassination, asking, "How can mediation succeed when one party assassinates the negotiator on the other side?" Although Iran did not immediately retaliate after this assassination, its October 1st attack can be seen as a response to both the Hezbollah attacks and the loss of a beloved ally. We then moved to the month of April, which was also packed with back-and-forth attacks between the two nations. On October 19th, 2024, Israel launched overnight strikes in Iran after Tehran's drone attacks on April 13th and the 14th. Explosions were heard in the city of Kajavaristan, and flights to Tehran, Isfahan, and Shiraz had to be suspended for precaution. Speculations are that Kajavaristan was a target because it was near Isfahan Airport and the 8th Shakari base of the Army Air Force, meaning that the attempt was to maximize casualties in the area. According to Iranian officials, their air defenses stopped 3 drones that flew over the airbase in the Isfahan area. Satellite images obtained by CNN show that there wasn't any extensive damage at the airbase, and the fallout from the drone's debris caused some light damage. Iran's missile attack a week before this attack was actually in response to another airstrike Israel carried out at the beginning of April. On the 1st of April 2024, an Iranian consulate in Damascus was completely obliterated by an Israeli missile attack that killed 13 people. Because the attack was on an Iranian consulate, we can conclude that the attack was technically on Iranian territory. Israel has had its eyes on Iran's movements in Syria for a while due to its military installations in the area, but this was the first time that an attack was carried out. This airstrike took out top generals and Iranian leaders, making it personal for Iran and its ally Syria. The attack was specifically targeting a meeting that was happening between Iranian officers and Palestinian leaders about the war in Gaza. Among the dead were important top leaders like General Mohammad Reza Zahidi, a longtime coordinator of Iran's covert options in Syria and Lebanon, his deputy general, Mohammad Hadi Haj Raimi, the chief of the general staff of the Quds Force in Syria and Lebanon, General Hossein Aman Allahi, and Hussein Youssef, who was a member of Hezbollah. Syrian authorities also reported that 2 Syrian police officers who guarded the consulate were wounded, making the fight bigger than just Israel and Iran. According to the report, the consulate was attacked by 6 missiles from Israeli F-35 warplanes. Although the building is described as a consulate, Israel believes that it is a military building for Quds forces, and therefore its attack was justified. Israeli Defense Forces spokesperson commented, saying, According to our intelligence, this is no consulate and this is no embassy. I repeat, this is no consulate and this is no embassy. This is a military building of Quds forces disguised as civilian buildings in Damascus. We will now turn to Israel and Hamas's long and extensive fight in Gaza, which has directly fed into Israel and Iranian tensions and the shadow warfare. The war on Hamas is technically a war against Iran as well, because the two are very closely aligned. When we look at escalation between Israel and Iran, our focus should not only be on those two territories. In the forefront, Israel is fighting Hezbollah and Hamas, but the fight is bigger than just these two groups. Let us take a quick look at the relationship between these three entities to better understand their dynamics with Israel. Hezbollah, which basically means Party of God in Arabic, is a militia group that emerged in the 1980s. From its onset, the group has been funded and trained by Iran's Revolutionary Guard, with the aim of fighting off Israel's occupation of territories in the Middle East. Since then, Iran has backed most of its operations and is behind a lot of the battles between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. Iran's relationship with Hamas is pretty much the same. The two share the same Islamic principles and have a great dislike for the West's interference in matters in the Middle East and its alliance with Israel. Iran financially and militarily backs Hamas's actions, specifically in the Gaza Strip. Annually, Iran has reportedly sent over $200 million in financial aid to Hamas, and in 2020, it allocated about $30 million to Hamas's military wing. Iran has also shared its military arsenal and drone technology with Hamas to help its efforts against Israel. To solidify their relationship, Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas are a part of a movement known as the Axis of Resistance. The aim of this group is to fight against Israel in the West so they can reduce their influence in the Middle East. Other members of the Axis include Syria and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. This connection is the reason why you will find that attacks on either of these groups affect Israel and Iran tensions. The fight in Gaza started after a surprise attack by Hamas in southern Israel claimed 1,300 lives and captured over 150 hostages. The event was known as Operation Al-Aqsa Flood, and it escalated the war between Israel and Palestinian groups. The name of the operation spoke to the constant struggle that Palestine and Israel had over holy sites in Jerusalem. Hamas started the attack by shooting over 5,000 rockets into Tel Aviv and Beersheba. The strike targeted airports and military sites, but also took out civilians in the process. Israel was absolutely enraged by the attack, and its attack on Gaza was its lethal response. Israel besieged the Gaza Strip in October 2023, and the war has been ongoing since then. Israel chose to retaliate in this region because the Gaza Strip has been ruled by Hamas since 2007. There has always been contention over the region, considering that it used to be under Israeli control. Israel initially captured the Strip from Egypt in 1967, but lost it to the Palestinian Army around 2006. In its attacks in the region, Israel has shown no mercy, and in the first weeks of the attack, it sent over 8,000 missiles into Gaza, telling over 1.1 million people in the region that they needed to relocate. For 6 consecutive days, Israel launched airstrikes every day and dropped 6,000 bombs in total in Gaza. This 6-day airstrike killed over 1,400 people and forced 338,000 people to flee their homes to take shelter. The United Nations Humanitarian Office has reported that the bombs in Gaza have taken out more than 1,000 homes and 560 housing units. Since October until today, the world has been trying to negotiate a ceasefire, but the recent escalations make one very unlikely. Before October had even ended, the death toll was over 41,000 Palestinians. As Israel has continued its assault in Gaza, Iran has threatened to intervene. Its recent airstrike into Israel is also an attempt to fight alongside its ally. In early January 2023, suicide drones with explosives struck a military facility in central Isfahan in Iran. U.S. officials who are closely linked to Israel reportedly told the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times that Israel's Mossad intelligence organization was behind the attacks. The facility that Israel hit was a weapons production facility, and according to sources on the Israeli side, the attack was a major success. Iran did not outrightly condemn Israel for the actions, but some Iranian officials told Al Jazeera that Israel would be receiving a response, and those who play with fire are the first to get burned if they decide to start a regional war. Although Israel's sources claim success, Iran stated that air defenses took out a small quadcopter and 2 other exploded above the site, causing minor roof damage to a munitions factory. On top of these significant attacks, all through 2022, Israel and Iran carried out various strikes against each other. In May 2022, suicide drones with explosives hit the Parchin military complex, which is 37 miles southeast of Tehran. The attack was not extensive, but the drones damaged a building, killing 1 engineer and injuring another. The IRGC commander Hossein Salami made it clear that Iran would be retaliating against Israel. Iran was the alleged culprit in this situation based on other attacks against Israel that had followed a similar pattern. At first, Iranian officials called it an accident, but then the language changed and they referred to it as an incident that was facilitated by a foreign entity. A few days after this, 2 Iranian scientists died of unnatural causes. Ayub Entezari, an aerospace engineer who worked on missiles at a research center in Yazd, died of food poisoning, and Karman Agamolei, a geologist, died the same way. Although these were two separate incidents, Iran blamed Israel and vowed to retaliate. A notable mention goes to Israel's cyber attacks on Iran during 2021. This cyber attack knocked out the system that allowed Iranians to use government-issued cards to purchase fuel at subsidized rates. While the attack may seem insignificant, the impact was felt at all 4,300 gas stations in Iran. The attack meant that consumers either had to pay the regular price or wait for stations to reconnect to the central distribution system and figure out the mess. Iran blamed both Israel and the US for the attack, and speculations were that Israel were testing out whether cyber warfare would be possible against Iran. From a discussion of the different attacks between Iran and Israel, we can see a pattern of back and forth. After one nation attacks the other, the leaders from the wronged nation pledge revenge and fight back. Attempts by nations like the US and Qatar to de-escalate the fighting and reach an agreement have been futile. The current escalations will probably leave more devastation for the two nations. While in the past, Hamas and Hezbollah would be the sacrificial lambs for the war between these two, the recent attacks have been in their territories. With Israel attacking, we wait to see how Iran will respond, because if the patterns tell us anything, it definitely will.
I did not have Israel striking Russians on my 2024 bingo card, but here we are. Last night there were airstrikes on Russian Hamim Air Base in Syria, and allegedly it was Israel doing it. Here are some clips of the airstrike for you guys, and then we'll get into why Israel is targeting Russian air bases. Now, of course, YouTube is not gonna like that clip because they're not advertiser friendly. And this is why sometimes we run the risk of our videos getting demonetized and worse yet, restricted. So if you guys can just take a second to hit the like button down below, it just helps us out tremendously in the algorithm. It wasn't just the airbase that was targeted. Other military sites in the region were also targeted, including the naval base that's also controlled by the Russian military. The missiles came from a naval battleship, and the bombardment lasted almost an entire hour. It's important to note that Israeli strike did not target the runways or the towers at the airbase or the civilian airport. That goes to show that the goal was not to leave these structures inoperational. Now, I'm sure most of you guys are asking two questions. First, what the hell is Russia doing in Syria? And secondly, what exactly was Israel targeting? Now, the first question has a long story behind it, so we'll get into that at the end of the video. But for now, let's answer what Israel was targeting in this strike. Now, of course, Israel didn't release a statement saying what they were targeting, and the likelihood they do so in the future is very low. But based on the facts we do have available to ourselves, we can make an educated guess as to what Israel was targeting. So just an hour before the strike happened, an Iranian airline plane arrived at this airport that was under Russian control. The airline was called Qasim Fars, but I guess the name of the airline is really not that important. What is important though, that the Iranian thought that the Russian-controlled base would offer protection to whatever they were transferring to Lebanon. When I say whatever they were transferring, in all likelihood it was probably weapons, and that's probably the same conclusion Israelis arrived at before they decided to take out the plane. Now, it's not far-fetched to believe that Russia was helping Iran. After all, the two countries have gotten extremely close ever since they became the top two most sanctioned nation on the earth. And I believe just last week, Israeli forces discovered Russian weapons in the Hezbollah tunnels.
This is what IDF forces found in southern Lebanon, in the troubled areas, in the villages. These are some of the findings. These are mainly non-manned missiles, please note, also made in Russia, among other things. Also, non-manned missiles, I mean missiles designed by Hezbollah terrorists, to be seen on Air Force planes and catacombs. These are the missiles mainly, but not only that, also documents, more than 1,000 documents found, maps, discs, the so-called flotilla intelligence documents.
During covert raids on Hezbollah bases in Lebanon, Israeli forces uncovered a cache of Russian-made weapons including MROA rocket flamethrowers, Konkurs anti-tank missile systems, and more. In fact, in recent months, Israeli forces have also discovered 20 anti-tank missile systems from Russia, along with Soviet-era RPG-29 Vampire, and much more. In fact, Russia actually has a strategic goal in helping all these Iran-backed groups like Hezbollah and Houthis. This is something we talked about in our most recent episode of our new podcast, Chaos and Peace. Listen to the clip yourself.
So I think it's very possible that Russia is trying to help the Houthis and others. We know that Russia has a history of working with groups that are banned internationally. And there's a logic to that, by the way, as well. But I would not be surprised. They do want to create chaos. They do want to take the attention off of the war in Ukraine. They want the Europeans to go worry about other things. And Russia, though, the relationship with the terrorists, I'd love to talk about just for a second, because I think it's so key and people don't understand it, is that Russia, like Iran, like North Korea, etc., is sanctioned. So it can't operate normally like other countries can, where it can send money via banks or even save money in foreign banks or reserves in foreign banks. It doesn't have that option. So instead it has to go to the black market. Hence why there's so much bartering and trade within these pariah states. But more than that, it operates also with terrorist organizations. Remember, after October 7th attacks in Israel, the Hamas leadership went to Moscow just a couple days later and very openly met with the most senior levels of the Russian government. But outside of that, we look at their cooperation with terrorist organizations in Latin America, including things that were the communist radical revolutionary groups and other things like this. But today, where it's even more important, is with the drug cartels. Iran cooperates directly with drug cartels. Venezuela does as well, and Russia plays a key role in helping to orchestrate the international drug trade. And this is actually fascinating. And the answer of why they would do this is pretty simple. Russia does not have access to a lot of things that it needs, but it can provide services to these groups so that they're more successful. But these groups also provide a second benefit, which is that a terrorist group or a drug cartel creates confusion, creates chaos, and also distracts the population from what Russia is really interested in doing, in this case, Ukraine.
Now, before we get into what Russia is doing in Syria, why it has bases there, I do quickly want to show you guys a clip that discusses how we can bring down the chaos in Middle East if we just defeat Russia in Ukraine. Because at the end of the day, the reason Russia is funding all this, the reason they're supplying weapons all over the place, all over the world, is because they want to take everyone's eyes off of Ukraine. Here, listen to it yourself.
Iran, of course, is behind Hezbollah. That Hezbollah is their main proxy. Iran does provide some support to Hamas and to the Houthis. Iran's only friend, though, is Russia. And so I think if we look at all of these trouble spots, Russia and Ukraine, Iran and their proxies fighting against Israel in different places, North Korea and China, if we think of them all as different parts of one strategic whole, it kind of helps put in perspective the importance of having strong alliances, strong relationships, significant amounts of military capability, and political will. And if you help Ukraine defeat Russia first, then Iran is left without any actual friend. And I think so defeating Russia could help isolate Iran, which would help take some of the pressure off in that region, perhaps. Now, I am pretty sure Iran does not want to get into a conflict with Israel. I also think that Hezbollah does not really want to get into a full-scale war with Israel because of the losses they would suffer.
Now, Russia in Syria is something we have covered in detail previously on this channel, so let's get into that video.